In the spring of 1979, I found myself in Khao refugee camp. It was a safe haven for the survivors of Pol Pot's massacre in Cambodia. I remember standing outside the makeshift camp, and there was a mist there, and people, several hundred, came out of the mist, many of them crawling, many of them stumbling, others taking very small steps, skeleton figures. And they then stumbled and fell into the camp. I could see even in their eyes the horrors that they had gone through. I'd been in Phnom Penh with a plane load of medicine just the previous couple of days. But then I saw some evidence of what Pol Pot had done to his people. He liked to chop off their heads and do a few other things that weren't very pleasant. But I got very angry, and I wondered how a civilized society could have allowed 1 million people to be butchered in this way. And also I wasn't terribly impressed with what the international community was doing by way of alleviating the suffering of the survivors. But now, as I look back, I take the view that perhaps very few people outside of Cambodia at the time knew the extent of the butchery and savagery which was happening. But we don't have that luxury anymore of not knowing. Because of Google and others, a light is shining into every corner of the world at the moment. So within minutes of that catastrophic earthquake hitting Haiti, people thousands of miles away were able to follow the destruction path and so forth on their mobile phones and iPads and all sorts of things. And this was wonderful in the sense that it galvanized the rank and file people around the world, and there was an outpouring of generosity, the like of which I've never seen. I've been in every dogfight and every famine and disaster since I brought the plane down to Cambodia that time. This was unprecedented, and it was because the people knew what was happening. They hadn't known before, not to that extent. And as a result, we, the aid community, together with the US Marines and social entrepreneurs, were able to mount what I believe was probably one of the best, most effective short-term emergency responses ever in the history of our game of responding to major mega disasters. And we were inspired by the heroics and the heroism and the courage of the Haitians themselves. I'll always remember this fairly elderly woman whose left arm was shattered, and there she was in the rubble with her right arm, digging away to try and find some of her 5 children. It was a futile effort, but it didn't bother her that her left arm was hanging out. That was the sort of strength, moral strength and so forth that these people, the Haitians, had. So it was a great honor for us to be able to try and help in some way. Now, it saddened me, but it didn't surprise me when the powers that be told me recently that close to 900,000 Haitians are still getting humanitarian aid, and 145,000 of them are living in tented villages and calling it home. That's unacceptable. It's wrong. It shouldn't be happening 4 years after 220,000 of them died and 300,000 of them suffered very serious injury, that they're still in need. But it didn't surprise me, because having been to the Rwandas and the Iraqs and the Afghanistans and all of the famines of Africa since 75, 76, I've seen the international response at first hand, and adequate would be the highest compliment I could pay it, but I wouldn't pay it. I wouldn't use adequate. But I've been disappointed as an aid lad. The response of the international community, it's unpredictable, it's unreliable, it's uneven. We never know. In Haiti, as I said, the emergency response was excellent. A few years ago, you probably have forgotten, but 20 million people were left homeless in Pakistan because of severe flooding. The response there was not adequate. Some of my colleagues still have nightmares. I don't, because I drink a lot of Guinness. But they tell me, and they keep repeating the stories of Goma. Goma, if you recall, again, you may not, but in the immediate aftermath of the Rwandan genocide, 2 million people flooded over the border, and the first place they hit was Goma. It was a volcanic region given to the refugees by Mobutu, the now dead, thanks be to God, leader, one of the most corrupt people on the planet, of Zaire. And we were looking after there about 300,000 of them. And somewhere in the region of 40,000 died of cholera. And the lads I'm talking about were Irish Army officers, and the job I gave them was to pick up the kids on the ground, and like the scrum half today for Ireland against Italy, he'd fling the kid onto the back of the lorry. And sometimes the child would be still alive, and you can imagine the sound of the kid crying in the air. But we had to do that so quickly because we had to do the best we could to stop the spread of the disease. These people were packed together like sardines. As I said, at one stage there was well over 300,000 of them there in a tiny area. This was the international community's response. These people had already avoided the machete inside in Rwanda. They'd got out, and then they fell victim. So, you know, I could go on with horror stories for the night about the international community's response. And I wonder all the time why basic common sense is never used. And I've heard an awful lot of common sense here already today, particularly from the engineers. And I'm not being critical of anybody else, but because engineers, again, they can come up with such terrific, sensible, common sense ideas, and they're so valuable to us out in the forgotten world. And I'm saying, why hasn't the international community done something meaningful about the situation? And I believe the time has to be now for them to, if you like, come clean and say that this ad hoc type arrangement which they have of responding to a disaster, for example, if tomorrow you hear on your television, on your radio, or on your iPad or whatever, that another earthquake has hit Haiti, it's quite possible another 200,000 people will be killed within an hour. Quite possible, because there's nothing has been done to prevent it happening. So you wonder the attitude of the international community. When I talk about the international, I'm talking about all of the collective governments of the world. So they should now decide, late in all that it is, they must set up a designated response mechanism that will be capable of not only dealing with the emergency, the obvious thing. The heart attack is always the one you go for first, but you've also got to look at the person with cancer longer, but they both kill, as we all know. So this isn't rocket science. You know, my grandchildren could devise a strategy here whereby this unit would be staffed by experts in all the various disciplines who could go to a tragedy, no matter how big. The world rebuilt Dresden 60 years ago. It leveled it. But they wanted to build Dresden. They wanted to let Germany know something. And they did it. But our attitude to the poor is rather different, sadly. This unit as well would need to have the support of every single member state of the United Nations. That way, the whole world would feel part of it. The whole world would feel ownership. And they'd want to succeed. I'd stack it with social entrepreneurs at the top. I'd keep bureaucrats out, at least 1,000 miles away. Victor Hugo once said that there's one thing more powerful than the most powerful army on the planet, and that is an idea whose time has arrived. Now, I'm absolutely convinced that the time has arrived to set up this international designated proper response unit. The tools are there, perhaps like never before. One, you have the compassion of the world. Because of the IT explosion and so forth, people, as I said earlier, they know about these things. They want to help. They're not interested in sticking plaster solutions. You know, I go around the place getting awards and all sorts of things. Then they say, but John, why did 500,000 people die? As if to say, it was my fault. It is my fault in a way, because I haven't obviously advocated strongly enough to enable me and whatever, enable the world to save everybody's life. Why are we burying more people than we save? You know, it's crazy. But the people want to see the job done in its totality. When there's a tragedy of whatever proportions, whether it's a famine, whether it's an earthquake, whether it's flooding, whatever, okay lads, go in, there's the money, now we want you to finish the job. In the same way as in normal life, that's the way we behave. It's not normal, unfortunately, outside. But the people are on our side. The expertise is available. We have more billionaires on the planet now than we ever had. And many of them have egos. They want to be asked, I'll save the world. Yeah, please, give me a call. They're dying to do it. So there's no problem with money. And because of the IT situation, we all know about it. So what are we waiting for, lads? Like, why, you know, what's happening? Like, why doesn't somebody get off their backside and do it? Well, the nature of the beast is we're into personalities. We're into dignitaries and high-profile people. That's okay. We saw in the last number of decades a huge number of these people. I'll name just some of them. Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, Ted Turner, Bill Clinton, Bono, Bob Geldof, George Clooney, Martin Sheen, Sean Penn. Now, they came up with tremendously innovative humanitarian suggestions that have saved millions of lives, enriched the lives of millions. You know, so the champion for this cause of which I'm proposing could well come from that group. Or it may not. It may come from some other group, but it will come. He or she will come because it's an irresistible challenge. It's not similar to Ernest Shackleton looking at that South Pole and saying, my God, I'm going to get there. This is every bit as important. I'll be the person who's going to be associated with the first ever World Fire Brigade for the poor. They think that the poor world doesn't have a fire brigade. Every village in the West has a fire brigade. But if anything happens in the forgotten world, they've nobody to ring. And if the John O'Sheas of this world are too busy drinking pints or playing tennis, you know, we don't go to the gig. So we never know who's going to turn up at the gig. How can we treat human beings like that? How can we? When rank and file people care so much. So yes, there will be a high-profile person will come out of the woodwork and say, I want this done. And believe you me, countries will rally round. Now, it's a win-win situation. The international community will be delighted to see all of the countries involved because we're all talking the same language. We're all on the same hymn sheet, and we're doing something really which is intrinsically good. We've nothing to fight about. So we can do all sorts of deals then. So it's very good for them. And then the name is important, very important. It would be a fitting tribute to the memory of our greatest ever humanitarian icon if we called it the Nelson Mandela Response Unit or whatever. That way you drag in every country. There'd be no issues. So that is going to happen, my friends, I believe, even in my lifetime. Now, if it doesn't, if we decide to park it and ignore it and continue with the ad hoc way that we respond to these terrible tragedies, the historians are not going to treat this generation very kindly. But worse, Victor Hugo's ghost will come back and haunt a lot of us. Thanks a million.